Welcome everyone to Oulton Park for our final race of the weekend and the final one for the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge. A little bit late starting as a result of some incidents, shall we say, earlier on in the day, but we have got cars heading out towards the grid now for their final race of the day. It's going to be a slightly shortened one because of those delays, the fact there is a pretty strict noise curfew here at Oulton Park, but we should get a good number of racing laps in before that happens. We've had some fantastic racing from the Ginetta GT5 Challenge drivers already this weekend, the opening round of the championship as well, so always an important set of races to establish who the favourites are going to be moving on into the rest of the season. Nat Hotchkiss certainly set his stall out as early season favourite on Saturday when he took a victory over Harley Horton and Sam Smith. But then earlier on today, Will Jenkins, who had a lap one retirement due to a mechanical issue in race one, stormed through to win the race. He started on pole, dropped a second early on, but halfway through the race got back ahead of Hotchkiss and never looked back, winning in the end by 2.1 seconds. They are the two drivers who will start on the front row of the grid. Will Jenkins, we just caught a glimpse of there, will start on pole with Hotchkiss alongside. That's because the grid for this race is based upon the result of that race earlier on today. So Jenkins will have the pole with Hotchkiss alongside. Mikey Doble will start third on the grid. Mikey got himself on the podium earlier on today after a gravelly retirement early on in the season opener on Saturday. So cars lining up on the grid. The weather is less than ideal. We've had these sort of on and off showers over the last hour or so, and we had one, 10-15 minutes or so ago. I don't think it's enough to make the circuit wet, but of course these GT5 Challenge cars do run on slick tyres, so if there are some damp patches, especially in and around the trees in the final sector, could well catch them out. You can see one car there with its windscreen wipers on as well, so maybe there is still a little bit of moisture in the air. This then is how the grid lines up in full. The pro drivers at the front, so Will Jenkins, the race 2 winner on pole, Nat Hotchkiss, the race 1 winner alongside him. Row number 2 for Mikey Doble of Zentech Motorsport, his teammate Conor Grady alongside. Those two worked together in qualifying on Saturday. Will they continue to do so in this third and final race of the weekend? Harley Horton and Ruben Haig make up the third row of the grid. Row 4 is where we will find Will Oulton and Sam Smith, who went backwards in the previous race, not literally but figuratively, lost a lot of ground in the middle part, so look for him to move forward in the orange number 8 car. Then Will Rochford and Harry Mangan round out the top 10. Row 6 of the grid for Dave Sutton and Ignacio Zanon, who's had a bit of a torrid weekend so far. Retirement on Saturday and unfortunately had a penalty in the previous race that dropped him down to 12th. Then we start getting into the last of the pro drivers there with Cian Donaldson and Sam Harvey. Donaldson went off after some contact earlier on today. Sam Harvey lining up alongside him. And then on the 8th row of the grid, we get the leading AMs. So Paolo Santi inherited an AM class victory after penalties for others in race 2. Balsidou likewise inherited 2nd position, so they start 1-2 in the AM class. Karim Sekat, who won on the road in race 2, ended up 3rd once time penalties were added on. Gerson Zarpello is alongside him 4th on the AM grid ahead of Phil McGarty and Chris White, who won the class on Saturday but had issues earlier on today that I never quite got to the bottom of, unfortunately. Neil Finnegan's issues we got to the bottom of. He was off the road at Cascades, I seem to remember, and that meant that he ended up finishing a lap down. So good to see some spectators sticking around to the end of the day. Those that are doing so will probably have seen this championship before, and they know that it's pretty entertaining. The clock still says this will be a 15-minute race. It will not be, because it is 17.5 minutes past 6 here at Oulton Park. We must have silence at the racetrack by 6:30, which means that the race needs to finish at about 6:28 or so, 6:27 maybe, to get the cars back into the pit lane. So by the time they've gridded up and we've got the start procedure done, we're probably going to have something like 8 or 9 minutes of racing to be had. So it will be a shortened race, and that, I think, could lead to an extra sense of urgency. And of course we get that really awkward situation where the drivers don't quite know when the checkered flag is going to come out. They've all been told it's a 15-minute race. It will not be, so a little bit of guesswork going on to work out when the last lap will be. So yeah, 8 or 9 minutes, as I suspected, is going to be the eventual time. We will hopefully get notification. I'll try and keep an eye out of the window to see when the last lap board goes out, so we can at least have some idea of when the checkered flag might be expected. Anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. We've got to get them through turn 1 yet. A very quick change there from the lights, and we're away and racing for the final time this weekend at Oulton Park, and it is side by side for the lead already. They're rubbing body panels. In fact, with 3 wide. Grady to the outside of the front row sitters, and off in the background go 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Amazingly, I think they should all be able to carry on. That could have been a much bigger incident, but they all survived to race another day. Right, Grady's got the lead. Donaldson and, Hodgkiss and Jenkins side by side for second. It's going to be Hodgkiss that goes through into second, so another slightly poor start there from Jenkins, as we saw in the previous 2 races. He needs to work on that. Once he gets going, he's very quick, but always seems to leave himself a hole to dig himself out of. It is then Harley Horton fourth, with Mikey Doble down to 5th. So Doble, conversely, has had really good starts so far this weekend. Not the case in this one. He's got Sam Smith behind him. Running wide there is the number 14. That's Dave Sutton at Shell, but he manages to hang on and keep, I think that was Will Rochford's 21 car behind him. So through the British chicane, they hammer the curbs again, particularly on the left-hander going into that sequence of corners. There is the 31, actually, it is, sorry, of Will Oulton at the back of this lead group. Conor Grady, though, leading the way. Grady has not had a podium yet this weekend. He was 6th in Saturday's race and 4th in today's earlier race. And he's on the grass as they go through his lops there. That will have cost him a little bit of time. They head into Knickerbrook Corner and make their way back up Clay Hill, further back in the AM category. There is the black, white and orange Chris White car on the tail of Karim Sekat. That will be for a podium place within the AM class. Which one it is specifically, we'll find out at the end of the lap. So up through Druids they go. Grady leads, then Hodgkiss second, Jenkins third, Horton fourth, Doble in 5th position. That will be the order into Lodge Corner. Will it still be the same order coming out, though? Because you can see that Will Jenkins is already trying to size up Nat Hodgkiss. He overtook him once for a race victory in the earlier race today. Now, though, he needs to get past Hodgkiss just to have a chance at going after Conor Grady for the race win. They go past the tyre marks into Old Hall Corner. A big mess has been made of the grass there down driver's left. I think all of the cars got moving, though. I can't see anyone park. Well, there is one of them that's not going to come through. Ruben Hay, Cian Donaldson, Paolo Santi and Neil Finnegan were the 3 who were delayed. So it looks as though those 4 were involved. Donaldson and Santi have not yet got to the line. So up towards Island Bend with potentially only this lap and another couple to go. We're looking at this being maybe a 4-lap race, I think, depending on exactly how lenient they are with the... Oh, off into the barriers. That's coming out of Cascades, and that is the number 16 car, which is off in a big way. And this, I'm afraid, might bring about an even earlier end to the race. Balsidou's race is done. And, well, it's actually not out of Cascades. It's further up the hill, further up the straight. That is sort of halfway between Cascades and Island Bend. He's got it wrong out of Cascades, obviously, but then quite how he ended up in that barrier, I'm not too sure. Challenge for the race lead. Here we go. Hodgkiss up the inside of Grady. He knows he's got to get on with this now. It was always going to be a short race, but now with the threat of a safety car, perhaps, it could be even shorter. Not that Hodgkiss will know that, of course. They were long gone by the time that incident happened for Balsidou. But he's certainly trying to make his move on Conor Grady here. He's being spurred on as well by Will Jenkins. He's almost pushing him up Clay Hill, and we do go safety car, I'm afraid. The safety car coming out, that is a real shame, but no alternative, of course, because we've got that car off at the entrance to Island Bend, one of the fastest, if not the fastest part of the circuit. So the safety car out. Now, how quickly can they get the car moved? That's the question. The safety car lap is going to be well in excess of 3 minutes, so it's going to be a fairly lengthy process, I think, to get the track cleared and get the race restarted. So we'll see what happens. There goes Grady. So Grady has the lead, and, well, this is playing nicely into his hands, actually, because he was feeling the heat there from Hodgkiss and Jenkins, and now no longer is he, because he catches the new for 2022 Lotus safety car, and will be able to coast around at low speed without having to defend from the cars behind him. So we're going to get a replay here of what happened at the start. Let's try and piece this together. It's all going to happen sort of 2/3 of the way down the order. Some of the leading AM drivers getting caught in this, including Paolo Santi, number 77. And there is the squeeze. So that is, I think, Balsidou, isn't it, who's just been off again, who came from extreme left of the road to extreme right as we look at it, because of contact, of course, and then, yeah, ended up hitting the barriers. Number 77, Paolo Santi, involved in that as well. So that was all a bit messy. We've seen that actually happen a couple of times already today, contact going into the first corner in other races, not in the Ginetta races. And that is a common occurrence here at Oulton Park. It's such a narrow circuit, and of course the start-finish straight is not a straight at all. It's a curve, and it's also quite undulating as well, and everyone wants to be on the correct line going into Old Hall Corner. So the squeeze, the scrum at that first corner can sometimes end in a bit of contact. We're getting a red flag. Red flag is coming out, and I fear that might be it then for our final race of the day, because the curfew's coming up in 3 minutes' time. Balsidou, I'm hearing, is out of the car now, but the barrier damage and the car in the way needs the red flag. This is what happened. He's already off the road, and bang, into the barrier. Big hit. Destroys the front of the car, does probably quite a bit of damage to the barrier. Even the rear got a whack, and unfortunately Balsidou's race comes to a rather abrupt end, and I'm afraid that will be the same for all of the drivers, because the red flag coming out on the third lap. They hadn't completed 3 laps. Now, getting ahead of myself slightly here, but on the assumption we're not going to restart this race, which I think is a likely assumption, we won't have completed 3 laps. That might mean that this race does not count towards full points, which going forward in the championship could be significant bad news for Conor Grady now, because it means that he potentially won't get the maximum 35 points that you would normally get for winning a race. It could be half points, but again, that's all just speculation. But it depends how many laps they have to complete. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, so we'll find out, I suppose, ahead of the next round at Oulton Park in just a week's time, actually, what the situation is, because as ever the GT5 Challenge are splitting their time between the British GT package and the British Touring Car package, so they've only got a week now, less than a week actually, because it's Monday today, before they're at Oulton Park. So a lot of them will be out testing Thursday, Friday this week ahead of that second event of the season. So as you can see, cars being directed straight into Parc Fermé. That means that is the end of our final race of the day. A shame that would have been a really good race had it not been for the red flag, but the race is going to come to an early stop, and that means that Conor Grady is going to get the race victory, and how many points he gets for that, we'll wait and see, but he gets the win anyway from Nat Hodgkiss second, and Will Jenkins in third position, Harley Horton fourth, and Mikey Doble to round out the top 5. A shame for the drivers, though, who have sat around all day. They last raced this morning at about 10:30, and sadly, their third and final race of the weekend ending after just 2 green flag laps. So they head into Parc Fermé then, and yeah, confirmation there of checkered flag. It is 18:26.5 now, which is about when the checkered flag would have had to have come out anyway, because of the noise curfew that I documented earlier on. And there the drivers discuss what they've seen out there and how their races went. Understandably, rather subdued celebrations down there, because it's not the way that anyone wants to score a race win or a podium. They would always want the race to go to its full length, but that sadly is not possible in these circumstances. So drivers then, Nat Hodgkiss there, you can see centre of screen. It's Conor Grady though that gets the win. Now the handshakes and the smiles come out, and they can relax knowing that that is their weekend's work done, and perhaps not a bad thing actually that they can have a bit of a rest now, given this short turnaround before the next event at Oulton Park. They'll be back on the GT package at Silverstone on the 7th and 8th of May, then back with the touring cars on the 28th and 29th of May at Thruxton, and the 25th and 26th of June at Croft, before rejoining us in September at Brands Hatch, and then October for the finale on the Oulton Park Grand Prix circuit, the 15th, 16th of October, the final round of the British GT Championship, and therefore also the final round of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge. So, rather subdued end to the day in the end, but a win is a win, and it's Conor Grady who got the win on the road. What we're waiting for is confirmation of whether the race essentially ran enough laps for that to be declared a result. This is kind of what I touched on earlier on. They only completed 2 laps before the red flag came out, and so whether or not that is counted as a race win, as a race result, it's normally 3 laps that have to be completed for that to be the case. If it is, then we'll get a podium. If it isn't, then we won't, because the race technically never happened and certainly never finished. And where possible, they will usually try and squeeze them onto another event later on in the calendar. We've had that a few times in the past when races have been cancelled for one reason or another, normally for this exact reason, because we run out of time by the end of the day. And they will do their very best to find 20 minutes of track time at another event later on in the year to run this extra race, and you get that slightly quirky situation where the grid for a race at, say, Donington Park is set based upon a qualifying session from Oulton Park several months sometimes earlier on in the year. But again, we're waiting for news on that and whether or not the drivers will be sent to the podium to celebrate. At least some points going their way, and some trophies nonetheless will be handed out to Conor Grady, Nat Hodgkiss and Will Jenkins. In the AM class, by the way, again, depending on where they take the results from, Chris White was actually leading the AM class at the time of the red flag, coming from the very back of the grid pretty much. He was, well, 6th of the 7 AM drivers on the grid after his unknown issue in the earlier race. I'm sure Chris will let me know, likes to get in touch on social media and fill me in on what's gone on over his races, which is much appreciated. It's hard to keep on top sometimes of everything happening in these races, but Chris, whatever the issue was in the previous one, bouncing back nicely to be ahead at the time of the red flag, shall we say, of Karim Sekat and Phil McGarty, who will end up 3rd, having got himself ahead of the number 22 of Gesson Zapalo in his Zentek car there just before the safety car came out, and then ultimately the red flag was thrown. So, still awaiting news then, and the main news is that Balsidou got out of that Ginetta at Ireland Bend, and Cian Donaldson, the driver, by the way, that had pulled over coming out of Old Hall Corner, saw a car parked to the right after that start line melee, and it looks like it was Cian, who's not had a good day. He was punted off the road, in his words, in the race earlier on today. Unsure who it was that got him, but he ended up in the gravel and off the road and not finishing, or at least not finishing well, finishing 16th overall in amongst the AM category. Right then, highlights of the final race of the Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge at Oulton Park. At the start, well, things got very lively. Conor Grady, from 4th on the grid, made a demon getaway, took advantage of the front row men seemingly focusing too much on each other to snatch the lead at Old Hall, whilst all hell broke loose behind. A 4-car shunt, a fairly minor one at this point, thankfully, but it did put an end to Cian Donaldson's race. Grady led by the time they got to Cascades. Nat Hodgkiss managed to get ahead of Will Jenkins, who had a couple of slightly lacklustre starts today. That was Chris White moving himself ahead of Karim Sekat for the lead of the AM category. This all happening inside the first 2 racing laps, which was all we got before this accident for Balsidou, who hit the barriers heavily down the Lakeside Straight. Not quite sure how he got there, but it destroyed the car. The barrier damaged as well, and with the noise curfew fast approaching, that unfortunately became the end of the 3rd and final Protyre Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge race of the weekend. So, a slightly bizarre end to the day then, but we will have the Ginettas, as I said, back with us at the Silverstone meeting on the 7th and 8th of May. Very much looking forward to that. For now, though, from everyone here at Oulton Park, thank you for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed your day of racing. We'll see you again next time.